Okay, maybe we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully others will be joining us in the next few minutes. Good morning and good evening, good afternoon to everyone. We have people joining us from many different time zones. I myself am joining you from New York, so it's a good evening from over here for me. Thank you so much to everyone online for joining us today. My name is Lee Tompert. I'm the coordinator of the UN Women's Project on promoting women's economic empowerment in the Indian Ocean Rim. This is a 3-year project supported by the Australian government's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. This project is also being implemented in collaboration with the Indian Ocean Rim Association, or what we call IORA. So for those of you who are not familiar with IORA, this is an intergovernmental organization which is aimed at strengthening regional cooperation and sustainable development within the Indian Ocean region. And it has 22 different member states and 10 different dialogue partners. So we're very happy to be partnering with them. Today's webinar is actually part of our project series on the UN Global Compact's Women's Empowerment Principles, or what we call WEPs. In addition to this webinar series, I'm looking at the picture that I included here on the screen. I wanted to mention that as part of the project, in addition to the webinar series, we're producing 2 reports, and one of the reports was just launched. It's on women's economic empowerment in fisheries in the Indian Ocean Rim region. And this report is available on the unwomen.org website. And we're also going to be soon releasing the second report, which is a broader focus on women's economic empowerment in the Indian Ocean Rim region, basically assessing progress and challenges, a bit of a broader report. And this is actually a follow-up report to a baseline report that we did in 2015. So please stay tuned for that report as well. Should be launching, I believe, in the next few weeks, hopefully. So today's webinar is actually the 6th webinar in our WEPs series. And rather than focus on a specific principle, WEPs principle, or specific issue, we thought we would take the chance today to share some of the tools and knowledge products that are available. Some of these are very recently made available as well. And these are to support the actual implementation of the WEPs. So we're also excited today. We have the opportunity to share the WEPs journey of one of our WEPs signatories from Indonesia. So we're hoping that these interventions are not only going to inspire new WEPs signatories, but also will be able to provide some of the needed support to already existing WEPs signatories to reignite their commitments to promote gender equality in the marketplace, in the community, and also in the workplace. Considering today's context of the impact of COVID-19 on women in the economy, the private sector needs this support more than ever, and women workers also need support in order to ensure that we don't even further lose the progress that we had gained on gender equality, particularly in the private sector. I'd like to just share with you, we have a brief agenda. We have the pleasure, I'm very grateful to both of our guest speakers for joining us today. We have Ms. Katja Frewald, Regional Program Manager of UN Women Asia and Pacific. And we also have Ms. Shinta Kamdani, who is the owner and CEO of the Syntesa Group, which is a WEPs signatory joining us from Indonesia. So I'll invite our speakers to share their expertise and their experiences, and then we're going to open up the webinar for questions from the audience. So you're welcome to send in any questions for the speakers throughout the webinar by using the Q&A tab that you should see in your Zoom bar there, or you can raise your hand during the Q&A session, and I'll call on you. So today's webinars, we would like it to last for 1 hour. I will try and stay true to that time limit. And just to let everyone know that it is being recorded, and that I'll share this recording in the next few days. And then just a nice request, if I would really appreciate it if you could just stick around a little bit just for a couple closing questions with our closing poll. It'll help us to better inform your interests for the next webinars. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. This is Ms. Katja Frevald, who leads our UN Women's commitment in the area of women's economic empowerment in Asia and the Pacific. She oversees the We Empower Asia program, which is a UN Women program funded in the EU that aims to increase the number of women who lead and participate in business in China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. So a key component of this program is to mobilize private sector companies to become more gender responsive by committing to and implementing the WEPs, as well as strengthening links between Asian and European markets through gender inclusive trade and supply chains. Katja has worked in the private sector for more than 15 years, and she was Unilever's Director of Global Partnerships and Advocacy for Women's Economic Empowerment, Inclusive Business, and Enhancing Livelihoods before she joined UN Women in 2009. Katja, thank you so much for joining us today. You're
Perfect.
welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having us and for giving us the chance to also share a bit of our experience that we have made over the last particularly 16 months here in Asia and the Pacific. And you have summarized very well our program, actually. So I will spend actually a little bit less time on talking about this and really focus a bit more on the experience that we have made on some of the implementation of the WEPs, coming from the private sector myself and from a company that has been a WEP signatory. I joined UN Women very passionately to really drive this action agenda forward, to really get into tangible action. And so last year, moving to the next slide, please. I think some of you might be aware, but last year we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Women's Empowerment Principles. And despite such a challenging year, I think for all of us last year and continuing, unfortunately, this year, we have really used the opportunity last year to really develop a set of new materials, new tools, new programs that we piloted with a couple of companies to really make sure that we develop for particularly our region, but equally interesting and replicable for other regions, to really join forces now to really drive the implementation much stronger forward in Asia and the Pacific, which was one of the regions which had the lowest number of WEP signatories. And we're very proud to say that alone last year, we added 300 new signatories through some of these tools that are going to just touch base very quickly on, and happy to share more details afterwards. So just to also be very honest and transparent, it requires also resources, obviously, for an organization like UN Women to implement these women's empowerment principles, for example. And we are very grateful for a program which is called We Empower Asia, which Lee touched on, which I'm leading in our region, and which is a EU-funded program, which really has the overall objective to increase women's economic participation in the countries that you see on the screen. And as said, moving on, one of the big elements of the program, there are three big pillars in the program, but one of the program pillars is really to work around getting more private sector engagement and more companies not only signing the women's empowerment principles, but really supporting and providing capacity building support for the companies to implement them. So that's what we are currently working on. And as part of this, as I said just in my introduction, we have developed a couple of assets and tools. And the way how we have been looking at this is really not looking principle per principle, but what I felt always very helpful from a company perspective to really look at this across the value chain of a company. So really developing materials and tools for workplace, around leadership, around marketplace, and community and transparency. So not being very focused principle per principle, but much more on a journey perspective for a company and a value chain perspective. speaking about a journey, so what we also have been doing is kind of helping companies, and I'm very curious to hear also from Ms. Shinta afterwards, but one of the earlier signatories, which journey you have been on, but what we've tried to do also in collaboration with some of our signatories is really to work on the journey and see what makes most sense for companies to really drive them through the journey. So one of the things, and I think Lee is kind of contributing to this with this webinar, obviously, is really raising more awareness about what are the women's empowerment principles, why is this so important for companies, and what's in for companies, what's the business case behind implementing the women's empowerment principles before getting companies actually to commit to them. So in the second step, to sign them. And then really in steps 3, 4, and 5, which I'm not going into detail, but really go together on a journey with companies to implement them and drive action. And I'm using the word journey very often because sometimes we get the question from companies and say, so do I have to, how can I implement all 7 principles at once? And what should I do right now? And what we feel this is impossible, obviously, and everyone is on a journey. Even the most progressive companies that have been WEP signatories for a very long time, they're still working and improving, exchanging with others. So it is really a journey. And before I go into the details of some elements and some ways on how to make this journey easier for companies to work on, I just want to mention very quickly, if we have time, I'll watch the time carefully, but one bigger addition to the women's empowerment principles, and that's actually a bit of a pre-announcement before we actually launch this very officially. The last part of the journey, the reporting element, we have been really kind of hearing also from companies, why is this all kind of voluntary? Why are we not reporting on this? What is kind of the transparency and the accountability? How can we follow up on this? And I'm really thrilled that we've co-developed with other regions together a new framework for the WEPs in terms of how companies can easier report in an aligned way. And we will be working on this also as UN Women to really drive this forward with other stakeholders. So if you have time, we'll share a little bit about this. If not, we will invite you definitely all on a specific webinar for this, which we will be holding in our region as well. So let's go into the tools and programs that we have been developing over the last couple of months. So I've kind of tried to split this into 3 areas. So one I call like tools and assets. The second piece is around particularly emphasis on new kind of trainings that we have been developing. And the third pillar is around implementation programs for companies on how can you implement the programs. Very often you need partners for this, and I'll share like 1 or 2 examples on how we've kind of helped or collaborated with companies on implementing some of the women's empowerment principles beyond sort of providing the training and capacity building to companies. So let's start with tools and assets. Just a quick reminder for everyone. The ones that are WEP signatories on this call already probably are very well aware of, but I just want to emphasize again that there is a gender gap analysis tool which is out there and not newly developed for a longer time, co-developed by UN Global Compact and UN Women. We have really kind of started to use this much more in the first part of the journey for companies to really help them to implement, to really take the tool, and then to really start building an action plan based on the results that come out of the gender gap analysis tool. And I think really this is a very helpful tool where we have heard from feedback from companies to really understand where to really set your priorities and starting your journey. So have a look here. There's also a link to it. I'm sure we probably share the content afterwards. So people can go into that. One thing what we have developed to accompany this gender gap analysis tool, which I have not on the slide here, is also an action planning tool for companies. However, we have not kind of put this out in the public, but we are using this with companies on one-to-one in mentorship also, and in some of our other programs, because it's it takes some kind of guidance, and it's not a tool that is built to be used on a one-to-one basis. So that is something just to share, that within our programs we have also a methodology that we offer to companies as UN Women to provide more mentorship support with this action planning tool. Moving on to the trainings, which I would like to share a little bit more, and this is like a very busy slide, and I'm unfortunately don't have the time to go in all of these trainings, but what we have really developed is a series of trainings for each, as I said, not only the women's empowerment principles, but very much also looking at leadership, the workplace, the marketplace, and within these very specific topics that we have prioritized. So they've trainings featuring really from gender equality in the workplace, with really emphasizing on, for example, flexible or parental policies, for example, as a deeper dive. We have developed and we are still developing a more deeper toolkit around sexual harassment in the workplace. But we've been also developing, and they are ready to use, toolkits around women in global supply chains, very much linked to gender responsive procurement practices. And I know you're gonna have in your series also a deeper dive on gender responsive procurement, and we are happy to share some of this as well. And a lot of these trainings coming also with tools that accompany them. So for example, an assessment tool for companies on looking at your procurement practices currently. So this is something where we are currently testing and piloting. So we're really kind of driving more new materials out there and really testing them. So they're not all tested and finalized, but really something what we are doing with companies together to make sure that we don't develop something top down, but really something informed with companies together. So this is kind of a first series of training materials, I think, that are very practical for companies. Now, what we could do is we could just send them out and put them on our website, and everyone to kind of taking them on their own. But what we felt, the value that comes with these trainings is really if you provide these trainings in a more structured way with multiple companies together, actually, not like a big webinar. But one of the things that we have developed is a program which we call the WEPs Activator. If we move forward, and this is basically a program where we put cohorts of companies together, so 10 to 15 companies maximum, and they are going together through a 10-month journey, which really starts with taking the gender assessment tools or the gender gap analysis tool. After this, as I said, we working with them to really identify their working areas and help them to put an action plan together through our new mentorship action planning tool. And companies might have different priorities in this cohort, and we form like smaller working groups that work on like-minded priorities that they have set. So this is really sort of envisioning a journey of 10 months, and approximately every 4 to 6 weeks are interactions with the companies, but also one-to-one sort of mentorship programs. And the way how I think the most fruitful way of some of these WEPs Activator programs is either you put companies together out of an industry. It could be, for example, really take a number of companies from IORA, kind of from your working group here, or from your different member states, and saying we are all in the same geographical regions and want to do something together. Or maybe if we hear from Ms. Chenta later on, maybe using an industry in a country and saying we want to have all the industry players together and go through this program together, so that we make a shift in the industry and have that opportunity. So this is one of a very practical programs which we're going to be roll out much stronger, and particularly in Asia and the Pacific right now. And then next to this, we have another program, and I know I'm talking a lot, but happy to take any questions afterwards. But I'm quite excited to see that some of our assets and then trainings are actually really anchoring now in very tangible actions and programs on the ground. And one of the principles, if you're really familiar with the WEPs and have been working on this, you will know that particularly in the marketplace area, WEPs principle number 5 is really about gender responsive supply chains, and very often around connecting women-owned enterprises to bigger, larger national or multinational companies. And so one of the things that we were looking at in our program is we had been looking at industries that are very important for the region, but also industries that are very important for, in our case, the EU, and to really kind of understand sort of the dynamics of these whole trade chains from one region to the other. And one of the things we've been looking at in the textile industry, which is a really important export good from Asia to many regions in the world, actually. And I saw also someone from Ethiopia is on the call here. I know textile becomes a really important industry for you as well in Ethiopia. But one of the things we looked at is we identified sort of what are the key sustainability challenges in the industry, and a lot of people and players are working in this industry. But what we said, like, what can companies concretely do to contribute to solve some of these challenges, by moving away from the very classical sort of, which are also important, responsible recruitment, workplace policies, etc. But how could we kind of really bring more women-owned enterprises into that industry, or into the fashion industry, textile industry? And basically what we have been doing, we have been working with 3 corporate partners, in this case H&M, which probably most of you know, and some more European focused companies with Bonprix and Chibo. And we have developed with them challenges which they have in their supply chains or in their kind of wider industry and their wider company. And we have put out these challenges, and we're seeking for entrepreneurs to help solving them. And we have put basically the women-owned enterprises that came up with solutions to these challenges through their own enterprises, startups, and some really kind of further evolved companies. And we have organized with them a 3-month learning program, which was in the beginning a weekly skill development program for all participants, and then a 1-week deep dive boot camp, where really the companies and the entrepreneurs work together to find solutions to some of the most persistent challenges, which led basically to really connecting the entrepreneurs much stronger to the companies, and really help the companies also to understand on how to source basically better from women-owned enterprises in their industries. So very kind of practical and very early stages, but something very specific, and we are intending to bring this to the next phase and seeking for other industry, other companies, and really kind of taking this to the next level. So this is all in terms of what I had to share in terms of programs and also trainings. And one last piece, if the time allows, Lee, I think I'm still good in my 20 minutes. If I have 2 more minutes, I would love to just kind of share a little bit more around the new accountability and transparency framework that the WEPs community globally has developed together. So it's not an Asia specific framework which is developed, it's really for all WEPs signatories. And the reason why we've started kind of looking at this, as I said before, is sort of we really wanted to drive more transparency. And we've been talking also to some of the signatories before and kind of looked at what does make really sense. And I think the balance that we try to strike here is, on the one side, not to overwhelm and to make it too complex, but on the other side also make it detailed enough that as WEP signatories or any kind of company that works around gender equality and wants to drive this further in their companies, that they have a really very clear framework on how to monitor their progress as well, and really set targets and walk basically the journey, but also measure it. I think that was something what we really wanted to emphasize on. We are currently also, I'm just saying this, conducting a study in the region to really understand sort of which of these indicators are really the ones that are delivering transformative change. And that helped us to come up with a very simplified version. If we move on to the next slide, where we basically say we want to make, and we have reporting indicators, which I call the essential, we call the essential reporting indicators, that are very strongly linked to the gender assessment tool, which are independent in which industry you are. It doesn't matter what size of your company, but that are really relevant and that everyone can report on, and which are currently also reported on already in different indexes like the Bloomberg or GRI. And sorry if I become a little bit technical here, but I think the main message here is basically we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but we really wanted to work on indicators which are reportable, where we know they are stretching, but we know that companies could report on them easily. Nothing is easily in this area, but it's feasible. And I'm not going to go into more detail. I could share with you which are all of these indicators, but maybe just giving you an idea. Amy, if you just move to the next slide very quickly, and I don't ask you to recall on this, but basically there are 4 big areas where we kind of ask companies to report on from a essential reporting perspective. Is women in leadership, equal pay, equal opportunities in the workplace, and you see the indicators there, and safe and inclusive workplaces. So these are the 4 areas that we really want to have companies to report on. There are more indicators if companies really want to report more for themselves, but publicly, we would love to kind of see more of this really publicly reported in the private sector. And we know also that some of the regulators and governments in our region, at least, are starting to look into this, and it's something we also will be working with them on. So I really think that will make a big difference towards a more transparent reporting also for the WEPs signatories. And with this, I'll stop it here. I hope that was a good and not too technical overview. And I'm happy to take any questions and also share more materials if needed, and invite you to any webinars we do on different subjects. So thank you very much for having us as a team here.
Thank you so much, Katja. Some of these tools are new to me as well, so I'm really excited to hear about them. You know, one of the reasons why we wanted to have this webinar today is that we have so many new WEP signatories, but we also have some more seasoned signatories that maybe have struggled to kind of really put the WEPs principles in action. And so I think that it's really important that these tools are being produced. I'm particularly excited about the fact that the trainings that your program is producing come with assessment tools, so that they actually are relevant to the level, you know, to meet the different levels that companies might be at in order to really make them useful trainings. And I also really like this idea of the action plan support to really look at where a company is, set indicators, set goals, and have a clear path. Because I think that the will is definitely there with everyone signing on to the WEPs, but I do think that some of the companies need some support. So I'm really very optimistic that a lot of these new tools that are being produced will be able to provide that support. Also, this idea of the activator program, I worked very briefly in our UN Women Tbilisi, Georgia office, and I know that they were having a lot of success with having new companies that had signed on the WEPs, basically having like a peer support group, a working group, where they were meeting to kind of discuss some of the challenges that they were facing. And I believe that these companies were even from different sectors. I think that, you know, any kind of mentorship is important, particularly even with the IORA region. It's such diverse countries, from different economic backgrounds, different cultures, languages, but often a lot of the private sector companies are coming up against some of the same challenges. So just being able to connect and understand what those challenges are and learn from each other of how companies are overcoming some of these obstacles to better able to support women in their companies and in their supply chains and promote gender equality is really important. And the lessons that are going to come out of your industry disruptor could be used by multinational companies around the world. They're not going to be, just limited to the Asia Pacific region. So, so very exciting. Thanks so much for sharing all of that. Hopefully, we'll have some time to discuss and have and answer any questions that participants might have. Let's see here if I could move on to my next slide there. Yeah, I'm happy to introduce our second guest speaker. We have the honor of having Ms. Shinta Kamdani here with us, who's the owner and CEO of the Syntesa Group. She's responsible for the management and expansion of the group's business interests in Indonesia. This Syntesa Group is an Indonesian group with 16 subsidiaries, which operate in the property, energy, industrial products, and consumer products. Ms. Kamdani also serves as the Vice Chairwoman of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Employers Association of Indonesia. She serves on the Executive Board of International Chamber of Commerce, President of Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development, as well as the founder of the Indonesia Business Coalition for Women's Empowerment and Angel Investment Network Indonesia. She's also a member of the APEC Business Advisory Council Indonesia. And in 2019, she was awarded Women Entrepreneur of the Year at the Asia Corporate Excellence and Sustainability Award. So Ms. Kamdani, we're very happy to have you with us. We're so grateful for your time. I will share the floor with you now.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity for me to kind of share our perspective, what we have done, our plans on this webinar. So I wanted to actually start by saying that we need to actually appreciate our current accomplishment in promoting women's equality, especially in the field of health and education. This is reflected in the Global Gender Gap Index in 2020 report released by the World Economic Forum. Indonesia is now ranked 85 out of 153 countries. I know if you look at the number, it's still very low, but it's actually quite a significant progress because in 2008, our score is only 0.647. And now we have 0.7. So this means that within 12 years, Indonesia has succeeded in narrowing the gender gap by approximately 8%. I have actually presentation that I would like to share. I don't stop share. Can you stop share the previous one so I can upload mine? Thank you. So ultimately, for every step of the leadership way, we are losing more women in the level, from recruitment to advancement and to sit in the top of the organization. There are only about 5 to 20% chances for women to be promoted. In Indonesia, there is a contrast significant. From 47% of women sitting in entry-level professional, and only 5% of them are able to sit in the top leadership position. On the other hand, we also need to see the importance of women leadership roles in the workplace. Although the share of women at leadership level is still less than 20% every job, in fact, women can actually give more impact on companies' performance. So I don't have to tell you this because I'm sure many of you have known that there is an increase in profitability shown if women is in the helm. And this is also shown during the COVID-19 pandemic that many demonstrated transparency, empathy, strong communication, and decision making during this COVID, and women leaders really show their way. So we know that in the third slide, I want to get the third slide. We know that women need to have equal opportunity to lead. However, there's still significant pay gap remain, and the gaps are pronounced even where women outpace men in education. So seen that in women's earning, where women on average earn 25% less than men. And this is also women workers with tertiary education can earn substantially 30 to 40% less than male counterparts. So most companies also said that there is they understand the importance of promoting the wage equality in the organization, but our research shows that only 6% of companies have actually active policy. So this is very interesting to see. With all this, actually, as background, Syntesa Group, we have been in Indonesia. Actually, it's a family business. I'm the third generation. We've been in Indonesia for 100 years. We are committed to be part of the solution, not only because it was good, but it's imperative for the strategic development. Now, having operated and managed male-dominated business industry, Syntesa see the strengthening corporate diversity and inclusion as a vital foundation of the organization's success. Reflecting on this principle, Syntesa Group has a goal of building an ecosystem, both internal and external, to promote women economic principle in the economy. At the internal level, we have promoted WEP across our organization. In navigating towards sustainable transformation, Syntesa Group has established our own roadmap of SDG, what we call Syntesa for the Earth. One of our main commitments is to navigate our organization towards gender-friendly workplace. Slowly but surely, we have done numerous gender equality initiatives. This also includes unconscious bias training that we had recently held. To empower also our male employees and also, I mean, of course, our female also, to avoid any gender segregation and discrimination. We also provide supportive infrastructure for women to be able to carry out their roles, both domestically and in work, through flexible working arrangement and infrastructure, from childcare facility, lactation room, as well as implementing many of the more gender equality policies in our company's policy. We also provide leadership advancement and various mentoring programs, including mentoring to understand also gender equality aspect in developing our sustainability report. We've worked with the IBCW, the organization that we founded, Indonesia Business Coalition on Women Empowerment, to review our gender equality progress using GEARS, the Gender Equality Assessment Results and Strategy, to evaluate our initiative and taken the tangible step forward. We are also the first company in Indonesia to be certified by the EDGE, which is the Economic Dividend for Gender Equality. Now, at the external and global level, Syntesa believes that the importance of providing opportunities for women to grow, not only at the internal employer level, but also to amplify the external through the empowering entrepreneurs, leader, and establishing synergy. So when I talk about synergy, this is private sector, government, academia, as well as investors to realize this agenda. This was achieved also. This is why we founded the IBCB and the Angel Investment Network, to empower more women entrepreneurs and business leaders in Indonesia to take an active role in increasing women participation in the economy. As part of the Indonesian also Employers Association, I'm the deputy chairwoman of this organization. Indonesia, we are also being part of the Indonesia MSMEs development, especially for women entrepreneurs, as well as communicating gender equality agenda across the private sector board. In addition, we are also, I'm sitting as also a business leader representing in the B20 and ABAC. In fostering business sector leadership, IBC Week consists of more than many private and public companies join hands to navigate gender equality across organizations together with government partners, companies, academia, and civil society. We have started discussion, building capacity, and collaborated action to provide enabling platform to push gender equality in the workplace, transforming value and norms, pushing policy-making changes. So furthering our work, we focus on 4 things. First is assessment of company business proactive towards gender equality and women empowerment in the workplace. Second, also conduct capacity building and networking for women talent specifically. Also providing companies to understand their gender equality and women empowerment effort and seek the possibility to share and replicate it within our members and beyond. And lastly, help our members with their networking and CSR on this issue, while at the same time advocating also the gender policies such as in various public events and platforms. Not only cooperation, we also see the role of investors are very crucial in pushing the greater gender equality and women empowerment. We are all aware that we need urgent support for women SMEs to survive and thrive, especially in this pandemic. Indeed, investing in women-led enterprises are more significant where companies that run by women has shown could generate annual revenue higher, even 12% higher than run by male. So we have to unlock the power of capital, not only by simply counting the number of women-owned, women-led businesses that have reached for the sake of making impact, but pushing for a bigger scale. This means promoting and building a better environment for business to actively pushing forward women equal participation in all stages. This including also investing in women's education, women business, invest in organizations that promote workplace equity, invest in business which offer products and services that substantially improve the lives of women and girls, and invest in business that include women in the value chain participation. So this is actually the background why I started also Angin in 2014. So I invited 15 of angels, women angel, and established the first Indonesia Women Fund that was specifically to assist women entrepreneurs, women startups in scaling up their business by providing funding, network, mentoring, and ecosystem. And as we grow, we aim to scale up the impact to grow beyond an investment platform. We aim to design new impactful services to build more impact for the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem and development partners. Also, I wanted to share our work with the Indonesia Employers Association, in where we have established what we call APINDO. APINDO is the Indonesia Employers Association, UKM, which is SME Academy, where 63% of our participants are actually women. And this program is designated to assist the MSME players, especially in unprecedented time also during COVID. During this time, we have established this platform to provide digital upskilling program and workshop. These programs are also mentored by business experts and industry players. We also bring in the forefront in bridging global economy partnership. We are helping MSME to access in international market, their export, to go export. And we have established a trading house and so forth in assisting them with digital market collaborating with various digital marketplace, so both offline and online. Furthermore, we also have unbounded advocacy to help SMEs accessing financial stimulus and national recovery fund during this COVID-19 pandemic. In the realm of the policy advocacy, we have actively led and participate in promoting policy reform across G20 countries and Asia Pacific through B20 and APEC Business Advisory Council. It has been an achievement for us to provide action-oriented policy recommendation focus on issues we are facing today, as well as raising Indonesia's women voice across global to level playing field to the level playing the field. In B20, we are actively advocating in advancing women leadership, equal play, flexible working arrangement, as well as promoting entrepreneurship and gender equal policy making. While in ABAC, we are driving policy reform to level playing field women participation in global trade, ensuring gender equality issues embedded in COVID-19 policy, as well as in opening financial access and inclusion for women entrepreneurs. Ultimately, we already understood that COVID-19 has impacted women participation in economy. Hence, to progress this agenda, there are the action framework that we have conducted so far throughout our policy, advocacy, and experience. Firstly, it's critical that companies focus on closing gender disparities early in the pipeline amidst COVID-19 crisis without establishing safe and equal environment for employees to work. Corporations are more at risk in losing potential talent and business growth. The pandemic, school closure, and inflexible working arrangement have impacted more women employees to find their career more at risk. To mitigate this risk, corporations need to develop program and policy designed to reduce bias by building inclusive culture, implementing flexible working hours, strengthening management commitment, and building management transparency and reporting. Corporations will benefit, grow more in the future. Moreover, Inquester also play a critical part in pushing towards our agenda. We need to see investment as a regard for financial outcome, but also to empower women to have an opportunity in driver's seat of growth and innovation, not only in helping the women entrepreneurs to survive and grow during the crisis, but also to promote more companies to implement women empowerment principles in employment, innovation, and value chain. Government, on the other hand, is also an engine to build inclusive environment in nations, and a government needs to work towards pathway that put more women-friendly legislative approach by strengthening legal policy framework for not only women as workforce, but also women as entrepreneurs, and enhance investor participating by providing more incentive for investors to apply gender lens investing framework. And to this end, achieving gender is not merely individual action by few stakeholders. This requires collective and synergized action across community. Therefore, in achieving one common vision, corporation, investor, government need to build synergy effort by first building collaborative platform, second, mobilizing public-private finance for gender lens investing, and lastly, involving multi-stakeholder synergies in policy decision-making and implementation. So together, we can pave the better way for gender equality and inclusive growth in place. Thank you very much.
Oh, Ms. Kemdani, thank you so much. If I wasn't scared of waking up my baby, I would be clapping really loudly. Really, this is amazing. You really have done such a wonderful job of not just working internally, but externally, and using your role in these different forums as well to promote the WEPs. I really am very impressed. I want to invite you back just to focus on so many of these different activities and initiatives that you've had. I feel like we could have a webinar on each one. But I am mindful of time. We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to get to any questions that our participants might have. I saw in the chat actually that someone has already, Ms. Jean has already provided us a few questions in one here. Let's see. I don't know if Katja and Ms. Shinta, can you actually see the chat questions as well? Maybe I'll read them out and you guys can decide which is more relevant for you to answer. We have thank you for your presentation. My question, what approach are you using to implement, I think she means implement the WEPs principles in a sustainable manner? She's seen that when countries ratify treaties, when it comes to the implementation, it actually takes a long time. Things remain on paper instead of putting it in action. Sometimes requires resources for private companies to implement the WEP. So how do you address the issue of resources to implement WEPs within companies? And what are some of the major challenges encountered during the implementation of WEPs in general, and especially among private companies that have signed on to the WEPs? So Kache, do you have any response in your work, maybe a general response? And Ms. Kamdani, if you have a specific response based on your company's experience?
Sure, I can go. I'm actually pretty grateful that the question around how do we make sure that not everything stays on paper is here. And I think I try to elaborate a little bit on this. I think what is really needed if we want to have a system change and not only have some of the companies doing things, I think it is really important to have these transparency and accountability frameworks, because I fundamentally believe only what you measure is where you will see change. So only what you see, you create a change. So I think it will be very important for not only for the companies, but I think also for regulators and policymakers to really emphasize much more on transparent reporting on gender. Why do we report on other sustainability areas? Why not on gender? So I think this reporting really will help. I'm sure if that becomes mandatory at hopefully a very soon, a moment soon in the future, then I think that will help. In terms of the resources for companies, this might not be a UN Women answer, but I think from my previous life in the private sector, I think what is obviously helpful to unleash resources within your company, and Ibushinta, I'm sure you probably can undersign this as well. I think the more you can also link this to the business case or how this will improve your business operations, the easier it will be to find resources for that. So that would be my guidance. If you are a company that has works a lot with, for example, on my previous example at Unilever, that works with brands and is selling branded products. One of the things we have been working a lot on was getting the brands to really own a certain cause linked to gender equality and make this part of the purpose for their brands. And then this will drive more equity for the brands and will sell more products, etc. I'm not saying that's the only way, but I think the more you can tie this and make it relevant for the business, the core business, and it doesn't stay somewhere as a sort of CSR nice to have, the easier it is to get resources. And the UN Women answer is, if there are programs like things like the WEPs Activator, for example, be alert as a company and participate in things like this. Very often they don't cost a lot of money, and particularly like, for example, on the WEPs Activator in the future, what we're going to be doing is grouping companies together in cohorts and cost sharing some of this as well. I think these are ways to really share the burden amongst different companies as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me share by saying this. I think when I started this work, wanting to champion and promote gender equality in the first place, one thing I have to say to myself is that my own organization, my own company needs to do this, right? I can't champion something if my company is not doing it. So I'm gonna just give you an example of what we're doing. There's a 7 woman economic principle, as you know, and I will start with the number 1, which is important, the principle 1, which is high level corporate leadership. So with me as a CEO, I have to ensure that my corporate leadership, and which is not including just in the holding, but in the corporate, all my subsidiary, are committed that we want to do this together. So this is embedded in our business. In other words, when I talk about the SDG, when I talk about roadmap, our own roadmap SDG, number 5 is there as our objective. So all across, we commit ourselves that we are putting this as one of our objectives, the number 5. So I think the high level commitment, and this has to be from CEO down, is very important. I've seen many companies, wanting to do this and have put this as part of an HR function, which is, I think, completely wrong. I mean, I'm not saying HR cannot make the initiative, but this is not just an HR issue. This is a leadership issue. So I think that's the first thing. And then if we talk about principle number 2, treat men and women fairly at work without discrimination, it's easier said than done. So whatever we do, we always have to translate that into how do we assess that? How do we know that discrimination is not happening in our organization? When we talk about equal pay, no gap on recruitment, how do we know that we're actually doing it? So it has to be, the process has to be given that we are assessing ourselves, we are actually equal in that sense. So, for example, I was taught by Unilever, as they said, Shinta, when we do recruitment now, we ensure that candidate has to be 50-50. 50% male, 50% female. We know that at the end, the decision is based on their capacity and skill, but the 50-50 needs to be there to start with. So I thought this is a way of ensuring ourselves, that we actually start in the right path. So things like this is easier said than done, but we need to establish the policy to ensure that this is happening. And why I recently asked all my leaders to take unconscious bias training, because when I talked to my HR director, he said, no, everything is good, we're doing fine, look at this, the numbers reflect, we're equal. But when you do the unconscious bias training, you can see that many of your leaders may just realize after the training that they have some unconscious bias. On the employer health, well-being, and safety, I think that's the third episode, which we are also doing it, because number 3 in the SDG is also part of our goal. Also education and training. During the COVID, we actually launched also what we call the Synthesis Executive Development Program. And I think this is very, very important in terms of the career development, that both female and male have equal opportunity on the training and education. And I find that because of the work-life balance, a lot of our female employees have more difficulties participating in many of the programs that we do. And this is why we need to ensure that they have the same opportunity by also supporting them with some of the issues that they face. For example, during COVID, while they work from home, they also need to take care of many of their domestic work, and that actually have more challenges for them to actually do their own work from the office. So this is something that we need to address, that some of this availability of education and access has to be there and supportive for women as well. And I think the most difficult until now that we are facing is the principle 5, which is enterprise development, supply chain, and marketing practices. This is very, very challenging. How do we put this in the supply chain? Of course, we want to work more with, for example, now we're trying to encourage more in our suppliers to also promote this, promoting gender equality in the organization. Many of our suppliers are a smaller scale organization. It's much more difficult, more challenging. So this is, I think, the toughest. And at the end, when we talk about business, right? The main for business, the main point is always still the profitability aspect. They're looking at cost. They're looking at a comparative in terms of it. So this is always, to me, until today, this will be the very, very the toughest part is the principle number 5. And on the number 6, also I think in a community initiative, we're doing this all the time. I think this is many companies I think Katya also mentioned this, that they don't want it to be just CSR. It's true, because CSR, actually many companies are doing many works supporting women empowerment, but it's a CSR program. And this is what I think is easier to do, a CSR program, but we want to go beyond that. And lastly, reporting. This is something that we are actually just starting to actually do sustainability reporting by including the measurement for the gender equality. So we are still learning. It's a big learning journey for us, but I do believe that reporting is a very big part, and it's very important for us to understand where we stand and to know our progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm mindful of time. So we had one more question that was about what approach and implementation method do you use with startups? Have you developed something that is startup specific? Katya, do you have a response to that?
So again, it's not finalized yet. So as part of the industry disruptor program that we have been doing, we have also been developing curriculum for women-owned enterprises. And one is focused, which we call for the moment WEPs Lite. So what we felt when working with these entrepreneurs, even women entrepreneurs, I was sometimes shocked is they don't have a gender lens very often into their operation, which is understandable. If you are a startup or a small company, you want to make your business work first, right? That is your core purpose. So but they were passionate, purpose-led entrepreneurs, and they said, we would like to incorporate the gender lens, but sorry, the WEPs, this is for us too much and too complicated, and how can we do this? And is there not a simpler way? And what we've developed is aligned with the WEPs, a very simple checklist for startups and smaller companies, not only startups, it's more really for smaller companies that they can go through and really sort of saying, have I thought about this? Have I thought about this? And then they identify one area that they consciously want to work on. So a very simplified 10-question checklist, yes or no, not sort of a deeper assessment. So that's one way we're trying to enter that space. And then from there, we'll see further. But I'm happy to share once that is finalized. We've tested this in Indonesia, actually, Ibu Shinta, with some of the entrepreneurship networks there, and amended with their comments. And now we're testing it in Thailand, and then we will publish it.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks so much. Okay, I think we're going to move to our last slide. I just wanted to really sincerely thank both of our guest speakers today for sharing your expertise and your time, which is very valuable. I also wanted to thank all of you who joined us online today for the webinar. I've included my email here if any of you would like to contact me with any follow-up questions. And I've also included the WEPs.org web link, where you'll find many of the resources that Katya mentioned today. And I'm going to send around a follow-up email in the next couple of days that has a link to the WEPs website, as well as specific links to some of the products and resources that Katya had mentioned on the WEPs. So if you just bear with me for 1 second.